So this is a real pleasure for me to introduce the team from FleishmanHillard. For the first time in 3 years, we have a sponsor for this event. FleishmanHillard has generously sponsored, and a big thank you to Rachel Kadanak and the rest. And also a big thank you to Chris Foster, who's the CEO of Omnicom's PR group and also an advisory board member for the Strategic Communication Program. See, there's interconnections here. So I'm going to introduce Rachel, and then I'll allow her to introduce the rest of the team. But we really wanted to do an agency spotlight here. So what is a world-class agency like FleishmanHillard doing with AI-powered creative? We want to know. We want a window into this. So Rachel Kadanak is the senior partner and general manager of FleishmanHillard New York. She's responsible for people development, cultivating client relationships, and securing new business. She's advised organizations and individuals on a range of issues, including executive thought leadership, corporate transformations, employee and labor issues, operational crises, data breaches, litigation, and shareholder challenges. A highly sought-after counselor, Rachel was recently recognized by PR Week as a woman of distinction. She is joined on stage by her team, Ephraim Cohen, Paul D'Alessio, Colin Hart, and Jacob Proposian, to discuss their technology as teammate approach to problem solving at FleishmanHillard. They'll share case studies, learnings, and demos from Fleischman's recent award-winning work and Gen AI Center of Excellence. Let's welcome FleishmanHillard.
So Jesse, the pleasure is all ours. It's such a wonderful delight to be here, and what a fantastic crowd. It's amazing. I know you've had a session this morning, and we're delighted to be following after lunch. It's always the dreaded after lunch slot, but I can see you've got the sparkle in your eyes. You must have had good dessert or coffee or something like that. I wanted to say that for us, AI is a work in progress. You know, everyone is saying, well, FleishmanHillard, we're doing award-winning work, and yes, we are. But AI is at the beginning of its journey with the agency. And so what we're here today is to show you both the opportunities and the challenges of the work that we're doing at the moment. And also to talk about what it means for our processes, but also how we reimagine work. And I think it's that reimagination, that creativity, that AI will really unleash. The thing that Jesse didn't mention to you about my background is actually that I started my career as a violinist. And so I practiced and practiced for a long time. In fact, did my first degree in violin. So I do believe that I bring a creative bent to public relations, you know, a bit of left brain and a bit of right brain. But what I also believe, and it's something that has really spurred my leadership style, is that creativity is something that everyone has. It is the innate thing that makes humans tick and develop and actually makes our world better. And so it is with great pleasure that we can talk about this subject in the context of work. Not only in terms of conceptual creative, you know, the flashy campaign stuff, but how we're using AI to really help with creative problem solving. So that's something. And the fact is that AI is being used considerably in the PR industry at the moment. We did some research with Provoke and they called Now Go Create in August last year, and it said around a third of PR professionals are using AI in creative work. Now, that's August last year. That's when the research was released. I could imagine that the result would have actually doubled since then. And it's being used in all sorts of ways, both allowed and sanctioned and not allowed. And we can go on to that as well. I think the other thing is that AI, as I said, is allowing us to reimagine and transform what we do. And in fact, one of my colleagues said just yesterday, It's borderline irresponsible if we're not using AI in our work. And so we're thinking about it in terms of how do we transform crisis simulations? How do we make things more efficient? How do we really understand what audiences are saying? How can we use them, that AI, to give us more predictive understanding? And so the team is going to be thinking about that and talking about that with little shows and tells. And first of all, Ephraim will be sort of giving an overview of the business. And then he's going to be talking about how it's being used in our newsroom. Jacob is going to, who's an ECD, is going to be talking about how we're using it in our creative work. Paul D'Alessio, who is a content extraordinaire, a partner in digital healthcare, will be looking at how we're using it in content development. And Colin Hart, who's head of our international relations and crisis in the US, will be looking at how we're using it in crisis for creative problem solving. And so we'll then be doing a panel discussion. We'll be talking about its use, and that's the time for you also to ask questions. So a little bit show tell and then some questions. Finally, our view is that AI is a collaborator, and the possibilities are really only limited by our imagination and our ability to upskill and transform as fast as the speed of technology and culture. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ephraim to talk about an overview of the business and AI.
Terrific. I'm going to... Just for my colleagues, I'm going to stay seated. So thank you. So a couple things about our business. Well, first, just so you know where I'm coming from, I have two roles at FleishmanHillard. I oversee what we call our media and platforms capabilities, and those are all the things we do with media or platforms, so media relations, social and digital content, et cetera. And then overseeing our data and digital, or what we really mean when we say digital these days, generative AI strategy and adoption, how we can basically create a whole new foundation for the firm and the professionals. So one of the challenges and opportunities is, okay, it's a sea change. We've seen technology adoption cycles before. Those of you who've been around long enough, Web 1.0, Web 2.0, social media, et cetera, et cetera. This one has, while the technology is not new, the challenge is from where I'm sitting and we're sitting, the cycle is faster than ever before. It's much faster. The cycle of technology upgrades is going far more quickly than our ability to adopt it. So how many people here have used OpenAI's Operator, for example? Okay, that may just be the norm in a couple months, depending on how quickly they refine it and they release it. And that has huge implications. Just feel free to Google anything while I'm talking. I'm sure you will anyways. And it'll just become the norm before we even have a chance to figure out how to fit it into our day-to-day lives, whether personal or professional. So that's sort of a macro challenge, but also an opportunity if you like change, which I love change. Because in change, there's a lot of chaos, but there's also a lot of opportunity. Full disclosure, I am only talking about technology change, just to be clear. So there are a couple things we look at our business, which we're one of the largest agencies in the world. We have a wide range of capabilities and industries that we focus on. So we really have to think about three things, starting with when we think about creativity, we're thinking about creativity in new ways. We're talking about better ways, more efficient ways, more creative ways, more impactful ways of coming up with the right idea. I'm pointing to Jacob. We'll talk about that. But we're also talking about you now have a whole new tool set to work with. What are new, more effective types of solutions that you can create with this technology? And it's as easy as typing into a box, how do I do X? So the ability to create and the learning curve for creating is far more powerful than we've seen in some time. And that's really important. And if you haven't done that, try that. Literally, how do I create this? And the instructions tend to be more or less on point. The second thing we're really focused on is people. So not solutions, not technology, but people. So I have a simple little, there we go, three simple rules. So there's still a lot of, are we going to be out of jobs? What do we need it for in the future? How many people here saw Wall-E All right, so I kind of love that because basically the robots did take over. And it's a good example of like, okay, it could get to that point. If it does get to that point, it's probably the next generation's problem. So I've already told my kids. But for right now, people are actually critical because think of these as the most powerful assistants in the world. And like any new assistant, you have to know how to train it. You have to know exactly what to ask for from your assistant. And then you have to look at the work and know if it's good. So your subject matter expertise and your judgment are not getting replaced. And if someone tries to replace it, you're going to get very plain vanilla, possibly completely incorrect work. So maybe the process side of what we do is going away, but for all those who've ever sat in the office and said, I wish there was a 25th hour in the day, I wish there was an 8th day of the week. Well, now you have it, because a lot of the work that was process work can be, I can format a newsletter in literally a minute. So now I can focus more on what do I need to train it on? What do I need to ask it for? Did I not like what I got? Great, I'll do it again. And that's not only powerful in and of itself, but it's a reminder that your subject matter, like focus on what am I really expert in? And that's where I have all these assistants that make me far more powerful. And then you get to the creative, which is now I have all these new tools depending on where you work. So what kinds of tools you have, but our strategy at FleishmanHillard is very much a part of Omnicom's strategy, which they've amassed this massive library of data and generative AI tool sets. They have pretty much deals with everyone. There are advantages to being part of a very large company, this large tools library that and our strategy is, instead of developing the solution and saying, hey, Jacob, Rachel, just use this, it's here are the tools, here's the wherewithal, the knowledge to use them, come up with the solution that's right. Be creative in that sense. And then for people to put it to work and come up with those solutions, one of which you'll see today. So an example of how that comes to life is here's a sample collection of different types of, these are custom GPTs, I'll just use the more generic bots. Some of these will become autonomous agents in the future that people are using as part of their profession, as part of their one-person team, them and these assistants, to get work done every single day. These will constantly change, these will constantly be upgraded, these will constantly get smarter as we teach it more, the first of the 3 areas. And what's important is because the subject matter experts themselves can very often at least do an initial creation of the solution. Like you're going to see a crisis simulator today that was developed hands-on keyboard by a crisis expert. And if you're already working or if you're going to be joining a PR profession soon, you'll see there are a lot of vendors that service our industry that don't have communications experts working with them, and it shows in what they deliver. It feels awkward. Now we are developing a hands-on. It creates a much, much better solution. And most importantly, when you cut out that learning curve and you create that accessibility, if you're on the agency side or the client side, we can create it with our clients, which means we can not only create more solutions now, like what you see here, but you can create solutions that not only work for you as a professional, but are much, much closer, if not completely on target, with the client need, or if you're in-house, it's the same idea, than if you hope what the vendor has works for you. And this is not to scare vendors, they're working on this too, and it'll make our life easier the more they get on point for this, but it's a really important point because the more powerful these solutions, the more powerful we are as professionals. So I'm going to hand it to Jacob to talk a little bit about how we're bringing that to life in the creative capital C space, and then we'll talk more about news in a bit.
Awesome. Thank you, Frym. What if they're like cute little robots, though, that take over? Is that okay?
That was Wall-E. They were cute.
No, I know.
little
That would be okay, yeah.
It's fine to me.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jacob Proposian, as Rachel mentioned, Global Executive Creative Director at FleishmanHillard. And I have the absolute pleasure to work across the globe with a ton of our teams, coming up with ideas with some of the most brightest and talented people I know to be in this business. So for all of us here, in terms of like us as FleishmanHillard, as a marketing communications agency, I think many people ask us like, well, how are you different from, let's say, an ad agency, or especially now, so many lines are blurred. What does that look like? And for us, we describe that difference and our North Star as we deliver earned creative. So hands up, has anyone heard that term before? Do you have any idea what I'm talking about when I say that? Okay. So a few of you do, which is great. But for us, Earn Creative is all about developing ideas that are meant to enter into the world and really inspire people without paid advertising dollars. So it's meant to earn attention. It's meant to be, I know the cliched, term of like thumb-stopping content, but think about what are the things that you stop scrolling for? What are the things that grab your attention? Obviously, a ton of campaigns that we deliver are supported eventually through an integrated marketing mix that involves paid sometimes, absolutely. But the idea in itself needs to be earned at the core, at the heart of it. That is how we differentiate ourselves as a business. And it's not that easy to do, I think, and for us, we use a variety of different tools to be able to make that actually happen. And as Rachel mentioned, we're starting to test out different ways of how we kind of go through that ideation process, from briefing all the way through to finding insights with our strategists. How do we come up with really great ideas in what's kind of now looking like shorter and shorter amounts of time? Like clients are asking for ideas and they're like, no, you don't have a month to come up with ideas. Like, I need this like next week. And you're like, okay, well, how do I figure that out? So we're testing all of those things out. And I think that what's important is that, it's still a work in progress. It's not perfect. All the tools that Ephraim and team give us the opportunity to play around with at the end of the day are tools that will make us be better and, of course, not replace us as well. And it keeps us curious. I think, to me, it's exciting. It gives us the opportunity to learn something new, understand how to expand our human capabilities with our minds and our reach and our understanding of cultures and different audiences and just culture with a capital C as well. So when I talk about Earn Creative, let me give you a few examples of what that actually looks like. So here are just a couple of campaigns that our teams have worked on over the last year and a bit. The first one is with our clients Novo Nordisk, where we worked with them and Queen Latifah to launch a campaign called It's Bigger Than Me that is meant to educate Americans and the world essentially that obesity is actually a medical condition. It's not a lack of willpower or character flaw. So again, we're trying to change what that looks like from a cultural perspective. And I'm going to give you little nuggets here and there that will make sense as we move forward. So to be able to bring this to life, we had to do a ton of testing to make sure that we got it right. So imagine the focus groups, the time, the money, everything that was spent to be able to make this happen. The campaign was extremely successful. It was able to generate billions of views, change cultural associations of what obesity was looked at. And we were able to measure that on the back end as well, which was absolutely fantastic. And of course, being able to work with an A-list celebrity like Queen Latifah is something really, really magical. And we used AI in a couple of instances. As you can imagine, Queen Latifah is a very busy human. And being able to get her to record a few things or do a few re-records is often challenging. So one nugget here, which was really exciting, was we were able to use AI to have her voice be replicated as a placeholder within some of our films that we were developing until we were able to get her into the recording studio. So finally when we did, so imagine, she's in LA, I was in Amsterdam at the time, and we're doing a re-recording over a Teams call, and I just played her what we did, and she just looked at me and she was like, Jacob, you do know Queen Latifah's trademarked, right? And I was like, yeah, we're gonna re-record this. It's gonna be all good. But she was blown away. She was like, that's me, but I didn't say that. And that was really, really interesting for her, even as a creative, to see the possibilities that could come through with that. So the next example that we have is with our client Lipton Iced Tea. So when you think of iced tea, do you think of Thanksgiving? Right? Exactly. So our client eventually asked us to insert their brand into moments in time that they weren't already connected with. And sometimes the universe is aligned and magical things happen. And through data and being quick on our feet, we're able to identify a really interesting moment with wide receiver Adam Thielen, who gave an interview while he was right after the game actually, an NFL game, where he was chewing some turkey and it was super dry. And he made a comment about this turkey being dry and spit it out. And our team jumped on that moment and turned it into gold. And we were able to bring him on board and introduce the campaign, which was, Ice-T's Bird Brine. And we were able to combine and create non-dry turkey for the holidays, which many people experience. I mean, there's nothing worse than a dry turkey on Thanksgiving, right? So we were able to deliver that, and that got a ton of earned media. Again, none of this is supported by paid. It's just interesting to talk about. The one after that, I believe, is with State Farm. Last year, so Super Bowl is coming back up again. Last year, we were able to work with State Farm to execute a campaign that was almost like a teaser to their commercial. So last year, they were launching a 60-second ad with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which they were being a little bit secretive about, but they were oftentimes we get briefs and it's just like, hey, can you PR this ad? And it's not the best, but sometimes it's the greatest opportunities that come from it. But our team was able to dive into an understanding of how powerful Jake from State Farm was. And so essentially the team kind of came up with the brilliant idea to say, how do we get the world and State Farm jacked up and ready for this epic Super Bowl launch? So what we did is we coordinated a little bit of a stunt with Arnold and Jake from State Farm and got them to be seen working out at the infamous Gold's Gym on Venice Beach and coordinated paparazzi-style photos to be able to kind of bring that to life. And media went wild. Like, they're like, why is Jake from State Farm working out with Arnold? And it just kind of created this really big moment for the world and to understand that Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to be in the State Farm ad, and it was going to be really cool. And then finally, with Chase, this was all about diving into cultural insights. So, I think for us, what was interesting with this, Chase came to us and said, hey, we have a new credit card feature that's going to be unlocking a really cool benefit that can help remove a barrier for group travel. And we're like, okay, great. How do we do this and get Gen Z involved? And I don't know about you, but I think the ultimate place where group travel goes to die is a group chat. We've all been there, right? We've all been there's always that friend who's kind of wishy-washy, oh yeah, we'll join, I don't know, but somebody drops out. It's the group chat where all these group plans and vacations kind of go to die. So we tapped into that insight and created the bold court chat, which we brought on Halle Berry to be kind of our spokesperson for it. And essentially what she did was she encouraged people to upload photos of their group chat and what was happening to be able to judge if they could get a pass or not. And that kind of created the opportunity for our Gen Z audiences to be able to interact with the brand, get into the ecosystem, and of course tap into that moment where they kind of want to put their friend on blast, but maybe it's okay if Halle Berry does it and they don't. So that was really interesting to be able to kind of do that. So some of these are, again, just high-level kind of examples that I think are wonderful ways that bring earned creative to life and are able to get us to talking about how we use and how we're starting to use AI. So how can we keep the momentum, right? As we continue to move forward, as we continue to identify, the different ways that we can keep earned creative alive and deliver it faster, better for our clients. So first and foremost, it's all about, what I was talking about, the unlocking of those data insights. Culture is huge. The intersection, earned creative thrives when we're intersecting it with our target audience, the world they specifically live in, and be able to utilize those cultural insights to develop a brief. The brief is so important. It gives us the grounding that we need. And it could take time. If there are any future strategists in the room or planners, it does take a lot of time. You're going through a ton of data, right? The research team is giving you a ton of data, and you got to go through it. So imagine a world where you don't have to really imagine it anymore, but using the tools to be able to sort through all of that and come up with multiple insights faster for you. Again, this is as an assistant. It's not replacing the human, but it's helping you as a tool to be able to get to better briefs, which I love as a creative, and my creative teams also love as well. Up next, then, we have the, hold on, I'm trying to see what's over there. It's the ideas, right? Yeah. So, I got it here too. So it's the ideas and the exploring of ideas. So again, we got the brief. Now it's all about how do we generate as many ideas as possible and in a shorter amount of time. And we can use our AI tools, and we're doing that to be able to have ideas be generated a lot faster. But here's the caveat. So when we started doing this, I had to, as an ECD, really sit back and say, okay, what is my role now as an ECD? If I have to create a world where a creative team has to have or be able to operate in a hybrid way, what does that mean for me? What are we looking for? When we generate ideas that are coming from the technology, we were on a call earlier this week, and one of our colleagues made a fantastic comment saying, this gives us the ability to not start from zero. Everyone has probably an example or a moment in time where you got to come up with something, but that initial kind of like go at it is sometimes so hard, but once you kind of get into the groove, then things start flowing. And this is, got to be able to think about this tool like that. So we might not be starting at a 0. It helps us to start at like a 5 with the examples that we have. And then for me, it doesn't replace the ECD. It allows me to be able to evaluate the work in a different way. It allows me to, and it should enable all of you to do the same thing. What is it that we can get as initial nuggets to be able to tailor from your human perspective that is going to be able to resonate? And also, again, think about where the information is coming from. These are all examples of things that have already been done before. So you got to make sure that whatever is being served up to you is just for inspiration, and then you're able to take that and make it into something different and unique and unexpected. And then from there, we have the refinement and enhancement. So when we think about, okay, we came up with an idea, we're able to deliver presentations and mock-ups faster with generative opportunities and be able to utilize the technology to generate some of the visuals and some of the copy. I mean, every client is different. Every body is different. And it's ideas and creative is subjective. So when we are able to present these ideas in a much more cohesive way, in a visual way, it gives people a little bit of a taste of what that looks like. It really enables us to do some amazing things and gives us the ability to work with our clients and each other to eventually get to that really, really great work. And then finally, we have the virtual audience-backed opportunity. So I mentioned focus group testing, right? So think about a world where you're able to test some of these ideas before you even go to the client, and you're able to say, hey, I was able to run this by an audience that maps back to who we're trying to reach, and the likelihood of this succeeding is at X%. If you've ever done focus testing, it takes quite a lot of time. It's quite expensive. This allows us to shorten that time and make it a lot more accessible. Again, it shouldn't replace focus testing at large, but imagine going into a client and pitching an idea saying, hey, we already kind of ran this through the audience visualization, and we're able to kind of say that this will work. And to me, there's something powerful in that, to reassure your client that we're not just coming to you to pitch pie in the sky ideas. It's all rooted in data and information, and it's that beautiful kind of like harmonization of creativity and also intelligence at the same time. So the takeaway that I want to leave for all of you is that be curious, stay curious, have fun, and also remember that AI is not here to replace us. I think for us, it's an opportunity to really reimagine the way that we can be creative as humans, reimagine the way the tools that are provided to us can help make the world a better place. And I can, if there's anything that I could say as a parting note before handing it over to Paul, is that I think we all have a responsibility to be able to utilize these tools to make the world a better place, especially in our current world that we live in, wherever you are in the world. I think utilize the tools that are given to you, reimagine how you approach it, how you approach the world, and just have fun in making the magic. So, thank you.
So, hey, thanks everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about content creation and where we're using AI to help take that content creation to the next level. I think one of the big takeaways that I always have is that we're not necessarily, AI is not the starting point, or sorry, AI is the starting point. It's not the finish line. That's just the beginning. We start with the AI, just as Jacob was saying, to get us to a 5. We're not starting from 0. We can use the AI to start creating blog posts. We can get articles drafted. We can get social media content developed, even multimedia scripts that we're developing. We can get all of that started, but that's not the end of it. What we really need to do is take that to the next level. The way that when we get to that starting point, we know that there's some AI is there to identify patterns. It looks at previous content that's been developed, and it looks at patterns that have been developed, and it starts to mimic those patterns. So it's not going to come up with anything that's net new yet, but it's not going. We know that there are a number of ideas that it'll start to pull from, and then we got to figure out how to take it to that next level. Sorry, I jumped way ahead. I'm trying to figure out how to get back.
Is it the right slide?
No, not yet, but it's fine. I'll figure it out. Yeah. So when I think of the storytelling, we know that there are there are 7 basic storytelling plots or storylines that people are using. AI has not come up with number 8 yet. It's always pulling from existing information. So we really need to tap into our known information. We need to tap into our personal experiences, our expertise. Everything that makes it personalized and ownable is the information we need to start putting it into there and be additive to what the AI has started with. I'm going to talk through, I don't know if we're there yet, but I'll just jump right into this. So this is a bot that we've created to replicate one of our executives who is a high-tech consultant. This is a synthetic audience we've created for this gentleman who wants to be much more present from a thought leadership perspective, creating content for LinkedIn. So we were able to take a bunch of information that he has published, articles that he's published, media interviews he's been part of, podcasts that he's been on, speeches and presentations that he's given at conferences just like this. We're able to gather all of that information and build a bot based on that information. We're also then able to hone his tone and voice, and not to get too cringy here, but he's in his late 60s and wants to sound like a Silicon Valley tech bro. The bot we're able to give it that information, and it's able to put in a California relaxed vibe in the content that we're creating, and it works spot on. It's really interesting to see how it works, and he was very happy with these results. My favorite thing is that we're able to ask it questions. Go in there and just say, here, can you react to this piece of industry news? What is your perception of the industry right now? Can you brainstorm some ideas? What's long form content that you want to put on LinkedIn? Now, that gets us, like we had said 100 times, that gets us to 5 or 6, because we're there. We understand where he wants to be, but it's missing that human element. I don't know his private conversations. I don't know what side conversations he's had at a conference or who he's met with. What was that conversation with the CEO where he has that inside bit that he wants to add in here? Just those anecdotes that make it interesting, that make it come to life and really enhance the story, make people want to read it and go, oh, this guy's got something here. Everything else feels kind of academic when you're just using the AI component. We can go to the next slide. So that idea of a synthetic audience or a digital twin is so interesting to me. It's really fun to play with. There is, when you start playing with AI, you'll know you get that instant kind of gratification, and it's something you want to just kind of build on. So one of the examples is creating these synthetic audiences. Down in Fort Lauderdale, there's the Dali Museum. They created this Dali phone. They took all the information we have about Salvador Dali, and they created this phone where patrons that go to the museum can ask it questions, and it'll answer in the tone and uniqueness and weirdness that is Salvador Dali, and it just becomes this very cool interactive moment with someone you'd never be able to speak to previously. This is clearly an impossible task, but AI made it happen, and it's kind of fun. But there's ways that we can think about this, of extending this way beyond just this one stunt, but building this into what kind of other interactions could we build for people to have conversations with a virtual Queen Latifah that you wouldn't really be able to have those interactions with in real life. We're not all Jacob. So if you want to go to the next slide, what I want to share here is, like, I look at things from AI through a healthcare perspective, and one of the challenges that we have is how do we make that engagement with an HCP, with a healthcare provider, easy? This is an example of a epilepsy drug that has a black box warning. It's a highly regulated area. There's a lot of really sensitive information, but we want to be able to communicate with the HCP in a very clear way what's happening. So the same technology, the same idea that's being used in that Dali phone is being used here, that conversational AI. Through the website, you can ask questions, just like I'm talking here. Tell me about the efficacy of this product. What are the things I should be worried about for my patients? And Dr. Klein here will answer those questions and give you an answer based on his knowledge, but interpret your straight questions and gives you a lot of detail. It's just exciting to see that type of real-time communication and real-time interaction achieving some real-time business goals of educating a really core audience on something that's rather difficult. And again, we know these doctors don't have a whole lot of time to be surfing the web looking for information. So just these are the types of technologies we want to put forward. So the idea of these digital twins, a focus group, creating that audience is going to become rather ubiquitous. It's said earlier, it's almost irresponsible not to be using AI. It's almost irresponsible not to be asking a focus group or a target audience how they react to something. And that's something we're trying to build on every day. It's a lot of fun opportunities from a content perspective, helping us get to that next level. But it is all about that, building that personal, professional, and human touch into it, that owned experience, real life experience, or bringing that to life.
Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Colin Hart. I work on our crisis team in New York at FleishmanHillard, and I'm filling in for my colleague Alex Lyle today, who had a family situation. So everything is okay, but we are excited to share a lot of his work. So I'm here to talk about crisis. So switching gears a little bit, I'm talking about crisis in terms of not us collectively being able to move these slides, which does seem to be a minor crisis today, but things like data breaches and things like a prominent beer company sponsoring the World Cup and then having beer banned from said World Cup 2 days before the World Cup happens. So crises in general are dynamic and unpredictable. They force communications experts who use a set of communications muscles, force you to use different sets of muscles in a time of crisis. So it puts a lot of pressure on communications counselors, on spokespeople, on all the folks that are responsible for communicating to key stakeholder groups. And then it also pushes rapid response. It really condenses timeframes in which communications needs to happen, and it really pushes us for both strategic and creative thinking, like we talked about today. So we're going to use the FIFA World Cup in 2022 as an example, which our team was on the ground in Doha helping this client navigate the challenges they faced. But I think it's an important point to make here when we're talking about AI and crisis. A lot of crises, most crises, if not all, are human-driven. It's the responsibility of human that created the crisis. So because of that, AI is not going to solve the crisis for us because we need to think like the humans that got a client, a person into this situation. But it is a really valuable tool that we can use to help up-level our thinking, up-level our strategies, and allow us to get smarter, respond faster, and really ensure that all stakeholder groups truly are factored in when we're communicating. One of the tools that we use to prepare for crisis situations is simulating crises of all kinds. So we're going to talk about how today our team uses AI to help us build crisis simulations for clients for the scenarios that are most likely to impact them and the scenarios that probably are going to have the greatest impact on their business and their stakeholders that matter the most to them. So when we're doing this, it's designed to, as best as possible, replicate what we think is going to happen in real life. We never get it completely right. There's always different dynamics that make it weirder than we ever can predict, but the goal is to make it as close as possible. So it also means that we have to develop scenarios that evolve, that we want it to be more difficult than communications professionals will likely deal with. So we want to bring in the evolutions and the escalations that are going to make what probably would have been a one-day crisis, 3-4 day crisis situations that ultimately have an impact on the business. And then we really want to make sure that we're focused on the decision makers, the decisions that need to be made, the questions that need to be asked, and really focused on the stakeholders which they need to pay attention to. One of the big challenges companies face during crisis situations is they forget about one of their key stakeholder groups. They forget about their employees, or they forget about their business partners, all of which are impacted just as much often as their customers or their shareholders. So it's really important to keep that in mind. So what we've done is we have built a crisis simulation lab that lets us more quickly build the types of simulations that in the past would have taken us weeks to build. So we're talking about being able to tailor this to the clients, the industry. We're talking about being able to pull historical data from their past responses, their past situations, their individuals that are often involved, their spokespeople, and also pull from things they've said from social media posts and how that potentially will create those evolutions to have an impact on them. So we have about a minute video, but none of you are going to be able to see it. So I'll explain what happens. Basically, we now can say, create us a simulation that does X, Y, and Z. So in this instance, we can ask the GPT to build us a simulation based on what would happen if the host country banned beer, our core product, 2 days before one of our key sponsorship events. And in doing this, we have pulled in a number of crisis situations from the client, but also from our proprietary library and our data tool stack, that we are able now to create a much more dynamic capability in terms of pressure testing the teams, both at the companies we represent, but also our agency teams as they're looking to navigate these challenges. So the scenario we have, it can pull through all kinds of realistic situations. We used to, in the past, spend hours creating just draft social media posts that we can put in front of clients to create those pressures and really test. Now all of these things can happen in real time. This, as you'll see here, it populates all of the different things that we need to think about when we're helping facilitate a conversation with the clients and the people that are there. So that includes, who are the people that needs to happen? What are the potential action steps? It can go as far as to say, well, should you be talking to the host country to see if this is a decision that can be reversed? All of these things can be pressure tested in a way that's so much faster and so much realistic than in the past. Thinking about it as a choose your own adventure story, which we used to have to put forward and have a decision tree in front of us, now all of that is happening inside this GPT, which is really, really amazing and allows us not only to prepare clients to respond quicker, better, but also make sure they're capturing that key important point that I mentioned earlier, all the stakeholder groups. So just to talk about, that's one key component we're using it from a crisis preparation standpoint. There also are a number of other ways that we now are capable of not only using this particular GPT, but also other crisis tools in AI. But because we can run a simulation to prepare clients, that also means now that we can run simulations in parallel to clients that are navigating crisis situations. So we now can take the decision-making in a simulation, run it against the decisions that are being made real time or being laid out or in front of crisis communicators and our corporate clients, and help them decide, are these the right decisions to make in this moment, and what will the reaction from our core constituencies and stakeholder groups be? Really, really fascinating stuff, and it's only going to continue to evolve. It's only going to continue to strengthen our ability to help clients be prepared, but strengthen our ability to respond. And it all comes back to that human component where it's going to allow a better consideration for the human elements that come with crisis communications. So we could have spent a whole session today, a whole hour on the situation in Doha in 2022, but it's really exciting things that are happening inside the GPTs that our team is able to create to help our clients navigate through generally the most difficult situations.
So we're now going to have questions. I can ask them a few questions, but this is also an opportunity for you to ask questions as well. So do start thinking of your questions. I will start the team off with a question, and it's a general question. It's about, you know, humans in the process and what titles will be. What do you think the new titles of the future will be for people, entry-level people coming into the PR profession? Anyone can answer that question. Ephraim, do you want to go?
Start with, and I'm someone, by the way, it'd be easier if we just didn't have titles, because we do spend a lot of time, but I'll give descriptives, if that's okay, because titles may change, they may not change. What's important is what they represent. There are two different areas right now. One is, are you coming in more with a purely analytical mind, knowing how to sift through all the data? When I say data, that's everything from an article to social media posts to properly structured data sets, to secondary research. So do you know how to sift through all that data? Do you know how to collect it? It's not about being a data scientist, it's about finding and organizing information and then being able to synthesize it and train and work with the bot to synthesize it. And then second is what I was saying before. What's the subject matter expertise you have? It used to be you came in, you had a general internship, and then you might have gone into creative or into healthcare, into crisis. But we might be looking for people to come in with that subject matter expertise so they can start working directly with Colin on day one on training and refining these custom GPTs or similar technology. So those are two areas we're looking at right now. And I would just say underneath all that, there will likely be, I don't want to say for certain, it's hard, things are moving so fast, much higher requirements in both the data and technical expertise we expect from people, but a lot of that will just happen naturally, just because what we would call sort of natural to the digital world a couple years ago is going to shift. And how many I don't know, will people raise their hands if I ask how many of you are using ChatGPT in college? Or good for you for raising your hands. I figure that's about a third of it. All right, good. But it'll come natural, but having more structured expertise on how to use it, technical expertise on how to set it up, how to refine it, et cetera, that expectation will probably get higher.
So this is a question for Jacob. Will creative conceptual skills be more important than technical skills, or what will the technical skills be needed in future?
I think it's a little bit of both, because conceptual is going to be absolutely critical and important. And from a technical perspective, I think, again, as we think about where the tools are at today, you will still need some sort of technical aspect to it. And I think kind of going back to like what could titles look like, I think for me, it would just be like you're a part of the creative team. And you could be, maybe it's separated as like thinker and maker. And you're able to, even flip, like pending the project. Like, hey, I want to be on project A on the thinking team, and I'll be on project B as the maker team. And I know kind of democratizes things a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's like if all of us have, our own assistants at the, for a project, and we're working in a hybrid environment, then I'm not a designer from a traditional perspective, but I work with designers on my team who are very talented, who then bring stuff to me, and I get to evaluate and adjust that. So if I can now do that as well, does that mean I'm now a designer? I don't think so, but I think we can also say that there's an element of like being able to take that understanding of the technical elements and be able to generalize it a little bit, and again, democratize maybe who and what is the makeup of the creative team at the end of the day.
Colin, you're about risk and managing risk. Obviously, using AI and creative also presents risks in terms of bias and transparency and homogenization. How do you overcome those? And Ephraim, you might want to answer this as well.
Yeah, it's really the question of the day. I don't think only for crisis either, but it's certainly about making sure that human element is still there. And as I mentioned, there's such a human component to crisis situations or to briefs or to anything else that we've discussed today. The human still needs to be there with the responsibilities and the consequences to ensure that risks can be overcome. And that role and how it happens is, of course, going to evolve as the technology evolves. But I just don't see, particularly when we're talking about high-stakes communications like crisis comms, for example, that there wouldn't ever be a human element to it. And I think that's the case for all of the things that the group talked about. Would you agree, Ephraim?
100%, yeah. I will say I'm going to get a little more technical about risk and how we're managing it.
Yep.
By the way, one of the risks, I should point, everyone talks about mis and disinformation and all that, just as a separate category of risk. I would just encourage you to realize there's more of it. It's not new. You can just ask GPT, give me examples of mis and dis from, say, presidential elections in the late 1700s and early 1800s. A lot of fun stuff out there, just moving faster. There's technical risk we also are dealing with every day. So everything we're talking about needs to be built on a foundation of, well, first of all, just very clear ethical and legal responsible usage guidelines. That's one layer of risk at a technical and legal level. And then there's, I think you just mentioned hallucinations, correct?
I didn't, but
You
it's
did.
important.
No,
It's an important one.
It is an important one. We talked about the four. There's also the risk of all types of risks is the output, whether it's in news media or in our work, creating a problem. That's what I call the dashboard problem. If you ever used a communications dashboard, they are pretty. Those dials look fantastic. People look at them, they have no idea if they're accurate. Very often they're not. The output from AI, it is articulate. I mean, it really seems, depending on what you ask it for, it can be articulate in Shakespearean or modern English. But so there's a risk of, are we being led in a good direction or a bad direction? So having quality controls in the data and methodologies, which we have to test it, and using your expertise, whether it's for your own internal output or dealing with a crisis scenario. I mean, again, the people factor comes in. It is absolutely critical. It's just, those are kind of like high risk, high levels of the risk layers, the risk protection layers we're looking at. And it's probably an area we don't spend enough time on, frankly.
Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Hello?
Yep.
There you go.
Definitely.
Hi, my name is Eli Cohn. I'm the founder of a venture studio and creative agency called Osmos. I'm also a part-time student here. Jacob, I really enjoyed your point about the power being given to the person to be able to identify the difference between good creative and bad creative. But my question is with tools like Midjourney for design and shoots and GPT for copywriting and automation with media buying and iterating, internal marketing teams, creative executives, and freelancers now have the power that mega agencies once owned for execution and fulfillment. So why should a client choose Fleischman or any mega agency over their own internal team? Like, what sets an agency apart?
Good luck, Jacob.
Well, as we've been saying, like, it's a combo of human and tool. So our lived experience is, I think, something that's extremely important that goes into the equation. I still believe at the end of the day that people want to do business with people, which is absolutely important. And really it's all about that, like the lived experience and the expertise that we bring to be able to evaluate and push through the whatever the biases that we're getting from a Midjourney perspective, where things are coming from a copyright perspective. You still need that filter that is absolutely necessary. And I think you make a great point. And then an example that I have is it's the same way if you look at like music, right? So as my alter ego, I DJ, and it's like, why do you need a record label? Because I put out like an entire mix off a whim, like when I was just traveling over the summer, and just said, hey, I want to just like put this out. And I essentially became like a one-man record label. I put out the mix, I created the cover art, I published it, I created a ton of social content, put that out there. And then for any gigs that I had coming up based off of who my audience was, I asked the GPT to be like, hey, like what's a 2-hour set that you would put together? And I used that as my base to be able to say, okay, like a lot of these tracks I probably wouldn't play, but it's a good start. And I think that that's kind of the way that you could do it. Every company, every business, I think, should be asking themselves the same question as you just asked us. It's like, what is it that makes us unique?
I do want to add in one other thing. By the way, all kidding aside, Jacob's an awesome DJ, if you're looking for him. Really is. And those types of side hobbies are incredibly important for creativity, AI side. One thing that's always been true, I used to own a small agency, so I hope this is true when I say it. A small agency can have just as good brain power as a large agency. That's always been true, it'll always be true. It sounds dull, it's not, it's exciting. The reason large agencies exist and holding companies is scale. And so what's happening now is a lot of what AI does in terms of mass personalization, as we've been talking about for years, that kind of scale, you just need a lot of tools and a lot of processes and a lot of money to set it up. So we actually end up competing a lot less against or in partnership with smaller agencies as complementary, because one just doesn't do the other. But when it comes to individual brain power and ability, it's good that the playing field is just getting more and more even, but it's always been somewhat even that way, at least when it comes to what's up here.
Yes, Judge.
Hi, Halima Gandhi, until recently I was a reporter and foreign correspondent based out of Nairobi, reporting on a lot of crises. Of course, the media in general have reported a lot the past few years about the challenges. Thank you. The challenges of AI. Have you heard me until then?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mostly the media for the past few years has reported about the challenges of AI and the concerns surrounding it, but it was only until I had the chance to do some professional development that I saw all of the different tools out there. That said, the question is, for those of us who aren't working in a big corporation or media agency or what have you, that has the resources to be on top of the different AI tools out there, how do you recommend one both does their day-to-day work or day-to-day learning and at the same time stays abreast on how AI can be used practically? What does that look like?
The reality is you're going to have to spend a lot of your own time. I mean, there's no magic solution. There are people who go in and say, teach me this, teach me that, use LinkedIn Learning, ask ChatGPT. The best way is at a time of change when you need to upskill, you need to spend, if you're already working, even if you're a student, as every minute you can get, learning on your own, trying out new things, reading. The one thing to take time at the beginning is, what do I really need to know? Do I need to know the technical differences of all the major models? Do I need to know the tool sets out there? Do I need to know every technique? Or here's what I need to know from my profession, which you can start learning if I'm in journalism. What are newsrooms using? What are the techniques they're looking? What are the technologies they're looking at? Almost create your own little curriculum. And then there's so much going on, and there's so, like I said, the technology cycle is moving faster than ever before, that it's just raw time. I love to give you a better answer. But yes, I and others are at 11 at night, are reading technical papers, trying out new applications, and trying to figure out what we need to focus on, and it's still not nearly enough time. But every minute you can squeeze out, it will pay off. The people who invest that extra time, again, true of any time of change, it will pay off for you professionally, and I think personally as well.
Yeah, I want to double down on that because I think I mentioned curiosity in my section, and it's you have to be curious. Like, if you aren't, try to figure out how to get yourself to inspire yourself to do that, because in these times, like you mentioned, when there's new things happening, new tools, and in a democratized world where you could learn so many things just off YouTube, not to go back to DJing, but like I literally taught myself how to do it by watching YouTube videos, like no joke. And you could do that, and it's, take the time, like invest in yourself. And it's free to be able to do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, just take that step and do it, and stay hungry and stay curious.
One more question. Yes, you. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. 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 Maybe we can do it too. quickly.
Good morning. Thank you guys for taking the time to come and speak to us. I'm very, very grateful as a strategic communication student here. But with all of your tenures, it's very inspiring, and I'm wondering what tools you guys utilize as leaders to constantly refill your personal cup so that you're able to cultivate that trust and regenerate that excitement and the energy within your creative teams.
I can go first. As a person that's generally not creative in my title, just the last 2 years, the introduction of AI as a tool that we all have access to has done a really great job filling my and my team's. It's making us more fulfilled because we're looking at new creative ways to leverage it and to work with it and to make our day-to-day more interesting, and we can spend more time on the things that, you know, are related to the work that we do, but really interesting to us personally. We can spend more time doing that because we now have access to a really powerful tool that, you know, things like expenses or things like creating copy or drafting, you know, anything that we need, we now have a tool that lets us spend more time on the things that we want to spend time on, and that gives us a lot more fulfillment and creative opportunities in our day-to-day where previously we didn't have that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, I think it's really important for our teams to always kind of share with each other their personal passions and bring some of that to the work every day. I know we've had multiple meetings where we have people just come in and share what they're doing outside of work. That keeps them motivated. You know, people love music. There's a lot of people that are playing instruments. Others are just, you know, it's making stuff at home. Or things like, I like to brew beer. That's kind of one of my passions. It's like a fun thing to do.
And it's good.
And it's good. Right. Sometimes it comes a little warning, like, you know, only have 2. But it's just, again, fun thing to find a way to be creative and experiment with different things. And you know, I think it's fun to hear like from across our global teams, what people are doing to stay energized and continue. I love to learn from my colleagues and figure out what keeps them hungry, what makes them motivated, because it also helps me just build relationships and know what's making them tick and what's, you know, when I hear something happening in that area, like I want to tap into their brain because it's going to inspire me in some other way as well.
One quick example, we had a person on our team 2 weeks ago use AI to facilitate a cross-office conversation on crisis, and we were able to pull in a bunch of information about the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni situation, and that person is junior and was able to facilitate a really amazing, robust conversation because they were asking questions. What questions do I ask the team to keep the conversation going? What are the key decision points that I need to pull through in learnings that's going to make this hour that the team probably wouldn't otherwise have really, really valuable for them? So it's things like that, you know, are a little less sexy and exciting than some of the creative things that we typically do, but does really keep people's cups filled.
Okay, so quick response from.
Yeah, mine is just humans and meeting people and learning about who they are. That to me is like some of the most inspiring and cup-filling things. Like I'm the type of person who's like sitting on the subway and even looking out all at you, just being like, oh, I wonder what their story is. I wonder what their story is. And to me, it's like, you know, whether you get that from a one-on-one kind of connection or TikTok or anything like that, like whatever it is that you got to do to fill your own cup, I think is obviously very personal. But again, I go back to the curiosity thing. Like to me, it's like you have to be curious or try to get yourself to be that so that you can see the positives and opportunities in moments where you might not even recognize them.
I'd say two things. One, find something you're not interested in and figure out what makes it interesting to you. Like actively look for it. There's always something interesting there. It's true of pretty much any topic. And then, you know, probably the other thing is it's, and this is not, I'm not going to make, this is not a social statement because I know this comes up a lot, but critical thinking. I think a lot of that has been lost. And the critical thinking, I'll put it this way, I'll call it the Wright brothers exercise. If anyone read about the Wright brothers, when they were trying to make a decision, they would argue, then they had to switch sides and argue from the other point. Trying to see things from all sides for any topic will get you exploring and learning more and make you more creative. So whether it's, should I use this application or that application, write an article this way or that way, pushing it from both sides is just a really good exercise, and frankly, can just be a lot of fun.
I like asking the question to my team, what's something you are passionate about and love, but you wouldn't recommend to anybody else? And I always think that always brings out really interesting answers, because it's something they clearly love, but they know there's a dark side to it.
And I would just say, for me, it's about making connections with people who I wouldn't necessarily know a lot about. Mathematicians, artists, writers, people who actually can look at the world through a different lens. And it's really important to do more and more of that, is look at the world through different lens. And that's how we'll finish. So thank you so much for your questions. Thank you.